Hello and welcome to the Buy, Sell, Hold Spotlight presented by Sports Car Market Magazine. I'm Darin Roberge. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also be sure to join in the conversation and share your thoughts by leaving us a comment below. Our guest today is TJ Grewal. He is the founder of CARPORT. Welcome, TJ.
Good to be here, Darin. Thanks.
For those who may not know you or know anything about you, why don't you give a little bit of background?
Sure thing. So I'm the founder of CARPORT. CARPORT's an app that we built to help car collectors and owners manage their cars more easily. So I'm a car lover and a car owner, but I'm not really from the car industry. My background's kind of corporate life. So I started management consulting, strategy, operations, that kind of stuff. That's when I picked up my first 912 way back. I think I paid like $1,800 for it or something like that. From there, I went into enterprise networking, another boring industry, did M&A, public deals, that kind of stuff, but it paid for toys. So I picked up my FGT there, my M5, my Mustang, an E-Type, and something else, I think, at that time. And then I shifted gears. I went to Beats, so got onto the consumer side. I got along really well with the founders of Beats, and so they were trying to build a company. When I joined, there were like 12 people there. And about 3.5 years later, we ended up selling the company to Apple. So it was a super fun ride. I ran product there while I was there, as well as operations. And I picked up more toys while I was there as well. And then I hit the beach after the Apple deal. And since then, I've really just been sort of advising companies, mostly startups, really early startups, on hardware and things like that. I spent a lot of my time around cars and cameras. A lot of people know me for camera work that I've done, various photography things that I kind of dabble in. And then kind of just fell into this opportunity around CARPORT. Kind of felt like there was a need here, kind of explored it a little bit. And that was about 18 months ago, and here we are.
CARPORT is very, very, very cool. So what originally inspired you to try to develop a system like this in the first place?
Sure. So I have what some friends called more of a used car lot than a collection. I have, at the time I had like 15 cars, and I was having a problem with a few things. When did I last drive a car? So I needed to keep everything kind of in rotation, and juggling parking spots for that. Staying on top of to-do lists. So I would often get into a car and then remember something not quite ready, so I couldn't take it on a long drive or something like that. And then trying to remember when was the last time I did an oil change or something else, because with 15 cars, you tend not to drive each one very much. So it's not like, okay, now I need to get an oil change every year, right? Maintenance sort of stretches out a little bit, but then you also become a little forgetful about it. So I kind of started there. I looked around just being curious and couldn't really find anything that sort of did what I wanted to do. There's fleet management software, but that's kind of really dorky and not really made for the collector. And then there's some other stuff that was kind of out there, but it was very superficial. It's sort of like, oh, collect your cars and show them online kind of a thing, but there's no value add to that, right? Instagram's fine for that. So then I dug in a little bit more, and this is where kind of my background started to come into it. So collector cars, if you believe the big insurance company numbers, it's $1 trillion asset class. And we can debate whether that number is real or not. But collector cars, unlike any other collector segment, are kind of unique in the fact that if you don't spend money on them, if you don't maintain them, you sort of lose value, right? Like, you really don't have to do that with art. Yeah, you do it with your watches, but it's negligible in terms of what you spend, right? In terms of maintaining your watches and things like that. Wine, you just have to store in the right places, kind of a thing. Nothing else, with the exception of if you're like ultra wealthy and you collect homes for some reason, right? Is there any other kind of collectible asset where you have to keep maintaining it, right? Not just, and I don't mean just insurance and registration. I mean, you have to rotate them, you have to use them, you have to, plastic ages, oil degrades, et cetera, et cetera. And so I felt like, well, here's a whole industry here that's not being served, right? And the thing is, it's all owned in end users' hands. So it's not like companies own all these assets, right? It's all these individuals, and they just need some little bit of help, right? So then I start to talk to other people. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm a unicorn, right? with so many cars. So I talked to people with, many cars, to people who had big collections who had them managed by other people, but then also talked to people who just owned one car, right? I talked to a lot of people who just had the single cars, or it was their weekend drive, that kind of thing. And they had needs as well. So we kind of like listened to all of this and said, okay, there's a product here. Let's start spending some time and money on putting together what a product would look like, figure out what we're trying to do, what it needs to be, et cetera. And that's how we ended up with CARPORT.
Well, you kind of touched on the highlights there, the main points of what the app does, but it does a lot of stuff. I've had a chance to play with it over the last couple of weeks, and it's really, really cool. Kind of give us the rundown of what CARPORT exactly does.
Yeah. So if I say to you, I want to help you manage your car more easily, and I ask that question to 10 different people, you're going to get 10 different answers, because people have different requirements or what they're trying to solve, right? So that was one thing that we learned when we were talking to everybody, which was whatever we build has to almost feel like a la carte kind of a model, right? It's sort of like, oh, okay, so if your big problem is managing to-dos, then we can solve that for you. And if you don't want to use any of the other functions inside of the app, you don't have to, right? If you're the dollars and pennies person who really wants to know how much have I invested in this vehicle, right? You can do that, right? If you just want to build a history of your car, you can do that, right? So that's really what we kind of want to address, which is users kind of have a variety of different things. And so we came down to kind of a couple of core things, right? So like we talked about, everybody has to-dos. I don't care if you have a brand new car, right? Or, you're driving a Stutz, right? You have to-dos. So that's kind of like universal for everybody. You can just enter them in and save them for yourself. You can check them off the list. You can sort of check them off your list when you think you've got them fixed, but when you realize they're not quite fixed, it's quickly added back to your list, that kind of thing. If you've been adding expenses, we'll even let you email your to-dos to your favorite mechanic, so that way you don't have to go through the process of explaining everything. Your to-dos go to your mechanic in their email with the pictures that you've attached, all that kind of stuff, just to make that communication and dialogue easier. We let you digitize your receipts. So it's a simple thing. You just take a picture of your receipt, you add a little bit of information to it. We scan it. It gets saved into your car profile. It's now searchable. So now you can go back on your older, receipts. So I have a 360 Stradale, right? So timing belts is a thing, right? So it's sort of like, well, when were the timing belts taken care of on this car? So I can just type in timing belts and it'll pull up the right receipts for me. I can do that with my mechanic, and we can see kind of what the frequency was, what mileage it was done at, that kind of stuff. We tabulate the dollars as well. Tabulating dollars is a scary thing for me. I tend to overdo cars. But actually, when I started to tabulate all my cars, it really wasn't too bad, right? And it's good to know. But we also let you tabulate expenses that the prior owners have given you receipts for, even if they're in different currencies at different times. It's just good to know how much money has gone into a car, right? Because if you're then moving that car on to the next person, you're showing how much that car was invested in and cared for, right? So you want to pull all that stuff in. We let you track basic maintenance. So what I mean by basic maintenance is we do cover general things right now, like oil, brakes, battery, and tires, right? We don't do something specific. So on the Stradale as the example, we don't tell you what the interval should be for the timing belt, right? We'll get there at some point. But for right now, let's just start off with the basics, just so you know, when did you do your last oil change? And we track that by mileage. And as you use your vehicle and update your odometer, the little indicator goes down, right? Telling you you're closer. Brakes are straightforward. Tires, we actually try to educate owners. But it's not when you put the tires on, it's what's the date code on the tires, right? That's what matters. And batteries, a lot of people don't realize that batteries have a life as well. We give you a life indicator for that too. So that helps you track kind of your basic maintenance. And then what we try to do, if you do update a lot of information, is we want to help you tackle the big word of provenance, right? So every car has a story, right? And I don't mean that in a bad sense. I mean, every car just has a story in terms of how was it used, how was it maintained, what things were done with the car, road trips, events, awards, etc. So we let you basically create like an ancestry.com kind of a list of your vehicle. So as you're updating your information, we plot out your expenses to mileage so you can see kind of what that curve looked like. But then you get to add all these other things to it, right? So like I have some of my older cars. I have an old 51 Porsche. And, I've uploaded like every owner to it, all the family photos that they gave to me with the car, right? So that's part of its history. The whole story of like how it traded hands and things like that. That's part of its provenance, etc. So we let you do that. And then all of the stuff that I've mentioned, sorry, it's a long response to your question. All this can be then downloaded back to you as a user. So you can upload all this stuff in whatever order you want. We organize it for you and you have it kind of whenever you want, kind of a thing.
Well, and it's something that you can zip to a new owner too. So, I mean, obviously everybody wants those big books with all the receipts and everything like that. And you should still provide that to people, of course. But now you've got a quick, handy, easy way that, again, you can zip to somebody who's considering buying your car, that they can zip to their mechanics or their inspection people or whoever they need to. That creates a lot of value, a lot of ease, and a lot of transparency from sale to sale, which certainly has a lot of value. So this is obviously an extensive project that you took on here in order to do this. So describe the process of designing this app and how, what kind of challenges you've encountered when trying to bring this to the market so far.
So designing it was really fun. Well, we quickly realized, it's a team of 5 of us in total. We're all based here in California. And what we quickly realized is when you start to focus on what I call kind of non-digital cars, right? So analog cars, they're not connected in any way. You're dealing with a lot of different complexities, and there's a lot of pieces of information that start to kind of intertwine. So we have to think about that, right? So how are we going to organize this so it's simple for somebody who owns one car or somebody who owns, dozens and dozens, kind of a thing, right? So thinking about data and organization was important. Then also to the point that you just mentioned, cars get sold and bought. So how do you transfer that on to the next user? We had to think through that. We knew that from speaking to everybody, privacy was a big thing. So the app is private. We don't link to any social sites. There is a way, if you want to show off kind of what you have in your collection with a link, you can do that. But that's not the main purpose of what we're trying to do. We wanted to have an appeal to everybody. Everybody in the sense of any type of car, right? It doesn't matter what you drive. You can log it in, and people are actually doing other things in CARPORT that don't involve cars, right? So there are a lot of motorcycles in there already. I have a 4x6 Gator that I have in there, right? Things like that. We went with mobile first, only because that's the hardest thing to solve, right? With all the data stuff, how do you fit that all onto one screen? And then we'll get to desktop and things like that in the future, but we wanted to solve it for mobile. And then just test. So I was obviously the main tester for a long period of time. We got to a point where I felt pretty confident about it. We made changes along the way. And then I started handing that out to some friends, right? Mechanics, other drivers, things like that, and got feedback from that process. And now that we're launched, so it's kind of a crawl, walk, run kind of approach to things. So I'm totally fine with kind of like slowly building a base, right? And getting feedback from users and reprioritizing what comes next in terms of features and things like that. The app doesn't have any what they call network effects. So you don't know who else is inside of the app and using it, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's good for the user privacy, right? It's bad for us as a business because then it's hard for us to spread the word. And we'll figure out ways of spreading the word, but I'm really confident based on the feedback we've gotten, people will start to tell other people. Like I've heard stories already of people, sitting around the dinner table and conversation goes to car and they're pulling out CARPORT and they're using it to flip through their collection and show it to other people, kind of a thing. That's kind of like the first hook, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly done that. Since I've been playing around with it, I've shown just about everybody. I showed my mechanics. I showed friends of mine. It's one of those things that once you kind of dig into it and start playing around with it, you see the potential of it and the niche that it satisfies. It's definitely very cool. So there's different kinds of vehicles out there, obviously race cars, show cars, et cetera, but there's also different kinds of users. So, how can this be used differently for guys that are into racing, guys that are into show cars or concours cars? But also, how can this be used differently for somebody who's maybe a private collector who only has a few things, or somebody who's maybe like a dealer who is constantly turning over their inventory?
Yeah. So the way that it gets used by any of those people is the exact same way. So what we do is we organize everything around a vehicle. And so you can have as many vehicles as you want in the system, and each vehicle can be a completely different type. So that doesn't matter, right? The way we organize the data is put in a fairly flat or generic kind of format. So where the concours, owner might be putting up things like certificates of authenticity or their FIVA card and things like that, right? The racer's going to put in their tech inspections, right? Their racer license and things like that. So they have it on hand and they associate it to the car, right? So if they're at track or they're going through tech, right, they can pull that stuff up. It's kind of like right there for them, right? If they're a dealer, it's a lot easier to take pictures with your phone and quickly build a vehicle card, and then through that linking service that we have in there, be able to show the world what you currently have, right? Than it is to go through the whole process of doing a website and having the photographer come and take pictures and all that kind of stuff, right? We don't really aim it towards them, but we know people use it like that, right? I look at all of that as just basically a signal of, okay, we did our job of building something that was very universal, right? It's interesting to see how people use it, but then how people use it internally is very unique. So for example, there are kind of the historians. So they're like, I just want to document the history of my car. So that, they're going through their binders, they're taking the pictures of the non-expense type stuff, right? But they're building kind of the story of the car, right? There's other people who are just doing to-dos. So it's just like, here's my car, I'm tracking my to-dos, I'm happy with that. And that's, they might get around to the other things. That's fine if they do, it's fine if they don't. Other people are just about expenses, right? So it's kind of like a single, pane of glass to kind of use all this stuff. But then how people do things is totally different. It's just, I get this report once a week and I don't see individual data. I just see kind of patterns of what people are doing. And you definitely see kind of a pattern of like, well, here are the historians and here are the expense people and here are the, the people who are doing their to-dos, right? Kind of a thing. And sometimes there's a little bit of crossover, but there's not always a ton of crossover. And then there's a segment of people who are doing like everything, like like they're doing like what I do, which is like all my cars are in there, everything's in there, that kind of stuff. So it's really flexible that way.
It is absolutely flexible. And I'll tell you, the other thing that really impressed me about it is I put all my motorcycles in there, and I've got some really, really obscure bikes, and they went in with no problem. There was no issues. I mean, literally this thing can take anything. So there's a lot of different stuff that we can do. So, speaking of motorcycles and other types of things other than cars, what else have you seen in there? Have you seen anything really unusual that made you kind of scratch your head a little bit, but that the app did work for also?
Yeah. So the app will work for anything because we don't, it's not like we have to have your make, model, or year in our database in order for you to enter your car. You could actually call your car whatever you want, right? Right. So that's why we sort of don't care. Right. But we know the users will, because they're going to be showing it off to people. So they kind of get it right. Right. But if they have like, oh, it's a 69 Camaro, they might put that in, or they might put it's a Yenko, right? And put in all the details in their build sheet and all that kind of stuff, right? That's up to them. In terms of weirdness, I mean, when I get that report every week, I see where users are. So we're around the world, and you see brands, right, of what models they have. And yeah, there's some models like I had not heard of before, and I'm like quickly Googling them. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's what that is, kind of a thing, right? And that's cool. And it's you sort of, find like these clusters of people who are like doing these things. Bikes for sure was one. We're actually building kind of like when you go in, if you are entering a car, We do have a database just to make it easier for you to load in your car, so you're not typing in the full thing. But I would like to be able to, it's on our list of to-dos, of letting you say it's a motorcycle. So that way you could classify the engine size at least and things like that. We don't let you do right now as a generic format with a car kind of a thing. And oddly enough, we have people, there's a few people in there with EVs. So I don't get it, but they're in there. But I think what I kind of take away from that is they're just passionate about their car, right? And so they just want to have a tool where they can put all this stuff in, right? And kind of, express their passion by collecting all this data and information like with it, right? So that's what I interpret from all of that, because we have a lot of cars that are like 2022s, right? 2023s. And I know like every OEM comes out with their own app these days, right? Where you can do a lot of things, but I guess we're filling some sort of gap there. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, it's good for sure.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to use. We've kind of talked about everything the app does, but what can somebody expect from a user experience when they log into it the first time?
Well, it's super fast. So all you have to do is basically enter in your year, make, model, and that creates a vehicle card. You can add a photo if you want, or photos if you want. That's totally up to you. And then from there, you're kind of off to the races for whatever you want to do, right? If it's to-do lists, you'll get prompted right away on to-do lists because we notice that everybody has those. And you just type them in. If you want to go to expenses, grab your pile of expenses. You don't have to organize them or anything like that. Just start taking pictures of them and enter in the little pieces of information. We'll index them, we'll sort them. So when you download your report, which is free, by the way, the whole app is free. You get it in a nice PDF document. Those documents were kind of important to me. We had a house fire, or not a house fire, but a wildfire near our house about a couple of years ago. And we moved the cars, but I was like looking at like my stack of binders in the garage. And I'm like, man, I don't want to lose that stuff as well. So now at least everything is digital, right? So, hopefully nothing bad like that ever happens. But it's really quick and easy, right? It's an occasional app, so it's not like something that you're going to use every day. We know that, unless you're driving every day and you're logging drives, which some people are. But it's sort of the thing where you'll use when you use your cars. So you'll either use it as you're logging a drive. You can do that. You can start a drive and it'll generate a map for you and all that kind of stuff. Or you can just update your odometer and that updates your, oil frequency and brakes and stuff like that. So we meant it to be really simple and quick and kind of establish the fundamentals. Now, what we want to do from here going forward are kind of add on to that. So for example, we heard some users who say, this is great. I've got a lot of stuff already saved in spreadsheets. How do I bring that over, right? And so we have a desktop version coming soon, so people can then enter information in with their laptops if that's easier for them. And then we'll let them basically suck in their spreadsheets and kind of organize that data that way. So we'll have features like that coming soon.
Very, very cool indeed. It's very simple, very easy to use, and I'm sure the feedback overwhelmingly has been positive so far. So what are collectors telling you so far that have beta tested it or if they're out in the marketplace using it?
It's sort of like it goes from, and this was kind of like everybody who I spoke to even before we launched the app, it goes like, yeah, somebody's tried this before, right? Or but I manage a huge collection and I use this fleet management software, right? So it's sort of like, you can go do it, but you're not going to beat this other thing. And then when people see how quick and easy it is to do, then they sort of flip, right? Because I think what we tried to do is build it from the owner up. So it's like, it's not like a complicated spreadsheet or anything like that. Like if you're on a drive, there's features that show up while you're on a drive. And if you're not on a drive, those features don't show up, right? Adding things in is really simple and straightforward. And I think that ease of doing it with your mobile device, that kind of opens up a new window, right? Because it's sort of like most of the time when I'm updating something, I'm still sitting in the car, right? So I just started a drive or I finished a drive and then I grab it and I update something. And that kind of like just makes it easy, right? And straightforward, doesn't seem like a burden. And then I think it's just a bit of a force of habit because it's not something that people do, like I think there's a very small percentage of people who would go out there and like log every mile that they drove and how much fuel they put in and stuff like that. There's people who do that, but I think, they're the minority for sure. And so we're somewhere between that minority and then people who are using it every day is kind of like where we're living right now. I don't have stats. If I did, I'd probably tell you, but I don't have stats to show like what's the frequency, like are we upping the frequency as people are using it? It's probably tied to when they drive. Like that's anecdotally, that's what people have told me, right? Like when I noticed like when I get feedback from people, it tends to be, hey, I just finished a drive and I'd love it if we could do this, right? Or I just did this, or people who are renting on their own cars, they're like, oh, I want to enter in all the work that I've done, but how do I do it? Because I, do all the work myself. And, and we're like, well, that doesn't stop you. Just enter it in, right? Kind of a thing, and you're good to go. So that's been pretty straightforward. We haven't really heard, there's been people who have said, oh, please, can you do a desktop version, right? Please, can you convert my Excel spreadsheet? Or can you log drives without me having to start the app, things like that. Like they're kind of like leaping to like, how do you make it even easier? We've got ideas around that, but it's a little down the road.
Yeah, it's clever app, clever product, and it should be exciting to see where it goes in the future.
Yeah. Another thing people ask is like, okay, so what's the business model, right? So a couple of things. So we're big on privacy. We don't sell your data. So we know people are putting in precious information into the app. So our business model is not derived around selling that data. What users will start to see in the future, I can't give you a date, but it will be in the future, is you'll get relevant in-app offers for things that you're going to spend money on anyways, right? So when my 63B needs tires, right, I might get a link for Coker Tire because that's a more appropriate place for me to go shop for tires for it than a tire rack, right? Or when my insurance is expiring, I might get a link if I want to, if the user wants to get insurance quotes done, right? Or financing options, things like that. So we think it's a very, very large market, and we just can tap into the money that owners are already going to spend and let them, if they follow those links, then, that's where we'll drive our business from. And in the meantime, we can offer the service basically to everybody. So that's kind of the model.
Okay, TJ, you're out with collectors, talking to people all the time. And of course, you have this app that has all kinds of interesting insights for you as well. So why don't you give us one car to buy, one car to sell, and one car to hold in today's marketplace?
Sure thing. So on the buy side, obviously you buy what you love and you're going to drive. Right now, it kind of feels to me like late 50s American cars and first-gen muscle cars are a thing to buy, right? I might be biased a little bit with Mecum auctions from last weekend, seeing some of the numbers, but I really feel like that segment of the market, like enough of the bad cars have kind of worked their way out of the system, right? And there's some great, great cars to have, whether it's like an early Impala, right? Or a bubble top, right? Or whether it's like a first gen GTO. I think they're just good buys because I think obviously if they're kind of restored the right way, or if it's unrestored, like not messed with, right? Kind of kept original. Doesn't have to be like show quality kind of a thing. I think, you've got a lot of options in the 30 plus K range, right? Of what to go spend money on there. And I think that that's a reasonable buy because I think the value for money there is great. Like those cars are not tremendously expensive to maintain, right? Really simple to work on if you need to problem solve something. You get a lot of enjoyment out of them. And, I used to have a 67 Fastback Mustang, and here in LA, I can tell you it was the most popular car when I drove it around. I had more interesting stories with people, with strangers in parking lots about that car, right, than any other car that I have. And so I just think that segment, I know you're looking for something specific, but I think that segment is still a great buy even today.
What are we selling?
Oh, I would, so I'll get more specific here. I don't understand Dino 246 prices right now at all. Like, and trust me, I buy cars based on design and how they look. And I love that car, right? I mean, many, many times I've looked at them and stuff like that. But when they're selling for more than Daytonas, that just doesn't make sense to me at all, right? So either I've got it wrong on Dinos, and Dinos are kind of like in their sweet spot right now. And if that's the case, then I'd say, well, then you got to put 365 Daytonas on your buy list, because that's like twice the car. You know what I mean? In terms of, true Ferrari pedigree, performance, right? Real GT class car kind of a thing. It's not delicate and things like that. It's a real great car. So that's something I'd be selling right now. And resto mods. If you have my point of view, if you've got a resto mod right now and you can sell it and be in the money, sell it. They're just too specific. There's too many of them out there. It's hard to find buyers when you might otherwise need to find a buyer. And so that's a resto mod, whether it's a resto muscle car or it's a Bronco or whatever it is, right? Once it's gone down that lane of being something super, super specific, you're spending a lot of money on it. And I'm not sure if that market is kind of topped out right now. It's getting kind of frothy, but I'd be getting out.
And what are we going to hold?
Anything that says Porsche on it. Anything. It's a really large market. So I believe in market dynamics, right? So that means it'll be efficient. There'll be some outliers here and there. Something's a little undervalued, something a little overvalued, but on general, right? It's kind of going to fit in the norm, right? And I think you can get into them at basically any price band. You want to spend less than $50,000 or $40,000, you can go out there and find a great 914, right? You want to spend, up to $60,000, you can find a decent 912, right? You want to spend $80,000, $90,000, you can find a decent 356B, right? So there's a lot of ways to kind of get into a Porsche and enjoy it. And on the top end, I think the GT cars are, fairly priced. I mean, some of them are a little spiky here and there. New owners, selling them off because they had allocation and things like that. So you can't really compare to MSRP. The market price is the market price. But I think like 996 GT3s, great cars, right? A lot of performance for the money, right? I think they're fairly priced out there. I would just hold them, maintain them, enjoy them. I can't see them crashing, right? Even long hood 911s, I can't see those crashing. It's just a big enough market, not enough momentum. And then I think to top it all off, I think Porsche's just done a good job of, their new cars don't really mess up the pedigree of the old cars. You know what I mean? Like I have an E9 CSL, right? And I hate everything that BMW is doing today, right? But new 718 Cayman GTSs, great cars, right? Even the electric cars are great cars. So I think the whole brand is kind of there, right? And so I feel like it's a great hold position on those.
You've got some kind of controversial statements up front there, but I think they make sense. If you think about the 50s cars and the early muscle cars, those are really highly restored cars that have been done right and maintained over the last several years. So the fact that you can sneak in and grab one of those without having to do all that restoration and all that maintenance work to get one that you can really enjoy is an opportunity for somebody that really likes that car. And with resto mods, one of the things that we tend to overlook, I think, with resto mods is how quickly they go out of style. Meaning, how many plastic hot rods with tweed interiors do you see sitting at Good Guys for 10% of what their build costs were? And I wonder about resto mods, especially as new engines come in. You see all these LS1 cars out there. Nobody really wants an LS1 anymore. They want the more modern, the bigger, the better, the badder LS cars that are out now. So you're really taking a risk with a resto mod going in heavy right now, because again, 6 months to a year, those could be totally out of style and everybody could be swapping in something else. Who knows? Tesla motors could be anything. And with your Porsche statement too, I mean, I think you're dead on the money with that also. The 996s seem like they're just right, finally about now to take off. People are understanding how great those cars are and what they are. And if you've got one, hang on to it, enjoy it. I think it's a great way to go. And Porsches in general, we talk about a lot on this show. tend to be very, very safe investments that continue to have ceilings that are undetermined. So, great picks all the way across the board. Any final thoughts?
No, thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
And where can people go to learn more?
Oh, you can go to carport.app and you can learn more about the app, or just hit your Apple Store or Android Google Play Store.
And again, it is a complimentary download, so go in, play around, and enjoy it.
Yeah, it's free to use, and have fun with it.
I would like to thank my guest, TJ Grewal, for joining us today. To learn more about anything that we discussed here, be sure to pick up the latest issue of Sports Car Market Magazine by visiting the link in the video description down below. As a reminder, if you enjoyed this content, please take a moment to like this video, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay on top of future episodes. I'm Darin Roberge, and thank you for joining us on the Buy, Sell, Hold Spotlight.